3,500 years. Entire empires turned to dust, and this secret remains sealed.
This is Mount Nebo in Jordan, the last place where he drew breath.
Satellites, ground radar, centuries of excavation. Nothing can find this tomb.
There's a difference between lost and guarded. And this is the story of Moses.
Abraham has a tomb. David has a tomb. The pharaohs built mountains of stone to house their bodies, but the man who confronted the most powerful empire in the world, split the sea in two, and spoke with God face to face, has no known burial site. 120 years of life, 40 years leading millions. And in the end, no monument, no headstone, no trace. The body of Moses simply vanished from history. The statement is recorded in Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 6. God buried him in the valley, in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, and no one knows the place of his burial to this day. The text doesn't say the tomb was lost over time. It doesn't say it was destroyed by invaders. It doesn't say erosion or earthquakes erased the markers. It says no one ever knew where it was, from day one, from the moment the earth covered that body, and that, to this day in the original text, was written over 3,000 years ago. 3.5 millennia later, the statement remains absolutely true. No archaeological discovery, no manuscript revealing coordinates, no oral tradition preserving the location. The silence is total. Put this absence in historical perspective. Abraham's tomb in the cave of Machpelah in Hebron is visited to this day by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The site was purchased for 400 pieces of silver, a transaction recorded in Genesis 23 with details of witnesses and negotiation. Sarah was buried there, then Abraham, then Isaac and Rebekah, then Jacob and Leah. The cave became a family mausoleum, and 3,800 years later, pilgrims still touch those stones. Rachel's tomb near Bethlehem is mentioned in Genesis 35. Jacob erected a pillar over the grave. 1,000 years later, the prophet Samuel still referenced the location as a geographical landmark. Today, a shrine stands on the same spot, visited by thousands annually. Joseph had his bones carried through the desert for 40 years. Exodus 13 records that Moses took Joseph's bones with him when he left Egypt, fulfilling an oath made centuries earlier. Those bones crossed the Red Sea, wandered through Sinai, waited while an entire generation died, and were finally buried in Shechem, on the plot of land Jacob had purchased. Joshua 24 documents the burial. The location is known to this day. The patriarchs, the kings, the prophets, virtually all of them left physical traces, places where someone can point and say with certainty, "Here lie the remains of so-and-so." David was buried in the city of David, Solomon in the same location, the kings of Judah in royal tombs that archaeologists still study. Moses, no. The most important man in Israel's history, the liberator who confronted Pharaoh, the lawgiver who received the 10 Commandments, the mediator of the covenant at Sinai, the only human being described in Scripture as having conversed with God face to face, as a man speaks with his friend. This man has no known tomb, no catalogued bones, no physical memorial that can be touched or visited. It's as if the earth completely swallowed every trace of his bodily existence, and the records indicate this was no accident. It was deliberate design. To understand what happened to Moses' body, you first need to understand the magnitude of who he was and how he reached that final mountain. The story begins 120 years earlier on the banks of the Nile. A death decree hung over Hebrew boys. Pharaoh, fearing the population growth of the Israelite slaves, ordered every newborn male to be thrown into the river. A desperate mother placed her baby in a basket of reeds waterproofed with tar and pitch and set it in the waters, exactly where Pharaoh's daughter used to bathe. The plan worked. The princess found the baby, had compassion, and ironically hired the biological mother as a wet nurse. Moses was raised in the Egyptian palace with access to the finest education in the ancient world. He learned to read hieroglyphics. He studied mathematics, astronomy, administration. Acts 7, verse 22, records that he was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty in his words and deeds. 40 years as a prince of Egypt. 40 years learning to be someone important, influential, powerful. And then, everything collapsed in a single impulsive act. Seeing an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, Moses looked this way and that, made sure no one was watching, and killed the oppressor. He buried the body in the sand. He thought the secret was safe. The next day, he discovered it wasn't. When he tried to separate two Hebrews who were fighting, one of them asked sarcastically, "Who made you a prince and judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" The secret had leaked. Pharaoh found out and sought to kill Moses. The only option was to flee. 40 years in the wilderness of Midian, 40 years shepherding sheep at the end of the world, from prince to shepherd, from palaces to tents, from commanding armies to guiding flocks. Moses went from being someone to being no one. And it was precisely in that state of emptiness that God appeared. The bush burned without being consumed. A voice called from the midst of the flames, "Moses, Moses, remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground." And then came the command that would change history. "Go, for I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." Moses had every excuse ready. "Who am I to go to Pharaoh? They will ask, 'What is the name of the one who sent me?' They won't believe me. I'm not eloquent. I'm slow of speech and tongue. Please send someone else." God accepted none of them. He answered every objection. He provided signs. He appointed Aaron as spokesman, and in the end, Moses went. At 80 years of age, he returned to the Egypt he had fled decades before. What followed were the most dramatic events recorded in the Old Testament. 10 plagues devastating the most powerful nation on earth. The Nile turned to blood, frogs covering every surface, lice, flies, pestilence on the livestock, boils on bodies, destructive hail, locusts devouring crops, darkness so thick it could be felt. And finally, the death of the firstborn, including Pharaoh's own son. Israel left Egypt. 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children, a multitude estimated between 2 and 3 million people marching toward freedom. Pharaoh changed his mind and pursued them. He cornered the people against the Red Sea, and Moses stretched out his hand over the waters. The sea parted, walls of water on both sides, dry ground to cross. When the Egyptians tried to follow, the waters returned. The entire army was destroyed. Exodus 14 records that not one remained. For the next 40 years, Moses led this impossible people through an inhospitable desert. He made water gush from rocks when there was no spring. He saw manna fall from heaven every morning for 4 decades. He climbed Mount Sinai wrapped in fire and thunder. He received the tablets of the law written by the finger of God. He interceded repeatedly when the people sinned and God threatened to destroy them. On Mount Sinai, something unique happened. Exodus 33 describes that the Lord spoke with Moses face to face, as a man speaks with his friend. Not through visions, not through dreams, face to face. Numbers 12 reinforces, mouth to mouth I speak with him, clearly and not in riddles. He beholds the form of the Lord. No other human being in biblical history had that level of access. Abraham was called a friend of God, but did not converse face to face. David was a man after God's own heart, but received messages through prophets. Elijah heard God's voice in a gentle whisper, but covered his face with his cloak when the presence passed. Moses stood before God with his face uncovered, and the exposure was so intense that his skin shone when he came down from the mountain. The people were afraid to approach. Moses had to wear a veil so they could look at him. 120 years of life, 40 as a prince learning to be someone, 40 as a shepherd learning to be no one, 40 as a liberator learning that God is everything. And at the end of this extraordinary journey, Moses arrived at the edge of the goal. The promised land was there, visible, reachable. An entire generation had died in the wilderness because of unbelief. The children of that generation were ready to enter. And God said to Moses, "You will not." The reason is recorded in Numbers chapter 20. The people camped at Kadesh. There was no water. The complaints began, as they always began. "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us with thirst in this horrible place?" Moses and Aaron went to the tent of meeting, fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared. The instruction was specific. Take the staff. Gather the congregation, speak to the rock before them, and it will yield water. Speak to the rock. Don't strike it. Speak to it. Moses gathered the people, he took the staff. And then, in a moment of accumulated frustration, after decades of enduring constant grumbling, he said, "Hear now, you rebels. Shall we bring water out of this rock for you?" And he raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his staff. Water gushed out abundantly. The people drank. The animals drank. But God called Moses aside. The verdict was devastating. "Because you did not believe in me, to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, you shall not bring this assembly into the land I have given them." One moment of anger, one impulsive gesture, words that put the focus on Moses and Aaron instead of on God. And the consequence was losing the prize of 40 years of leadership, harsh, to human eyes, disproportionate. But Moses did not protest. He did not negotiate. He did not try to bargain for a reduced sentence. He accepted. And now, at the end, he climbed Mount Nebo to see from afar what his feet would never touch. Deuteronomy 34 describes the final moments with impressive geographical precision. Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo to the top of Pisgah, opposite Jericho. And the Lord showed him all the land. The list is extensive. Gilead as far as Dan, all of Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all the land of Judah to the western sea, the Negev, the plain of the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees as far as Zoar, north, south, east, west, from the mountains of Galilee to the deserts of the Negev, from the Mediterranean to the Jordan Valley. God did not show a glimpse. He showed everything, a complete panorama of the inheritance Moses had led the people to receive, even knowing he would not enter. And then comes the most extraordinary physical detail. Moses was 120 years old when he died. His eye was not dim, nor his vigor diminished. 120 years, and his body still functioned perfectly. Think about the implication. Eyes that saw with total clarity, capable of discerning geographical details tens of kilometers away. Physical strength that had not waned, capable of climbing a mountain without help. This was not a man consumed by age, dragging himself up in his final breaths. This was a physically capable, mentally lucid man, climbing to die not from weakness but from obedience. Moses' death was not natural in the ordinary sense. It did not come from illness. It did not come from organ failure. It was appointed, scheduled, fulfilled at the exact moment determined by God. Verse 5 brings the strangest phrase in the entire account. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. The Hebrew expression is al-pi Adonai, literally, by the mouth of the Lord, or according to the mouth of the Lord. The Standard Translation interprets it as according to the command of the Lord, meaning Moses died when God determined. But ancient rabbis read it differently. They interpreted poetically that God took Moses' life with a kiss. The soul departed not by violence, not by physical collapse, but by an act of divine tenderness, a kiss from eternity. Whether this is literal or metaphorical, the text does not clarify. But what comes next is even more disturbing. Verse 6. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. And no one knows the place of his burial to this day. The grammatical subject is crucial. Who buried him? The Hebrew text does not use a plural. It was not the Israelites. It was not the Levites. It was not the elders. It was not Joshua who had been designated as successor. The implied subject, by grammatical construction and contextual flow, is God himself. God buried Moses personally, the creator of the universe, the one who sustains galaxies with his word, the one before whom seraphim cover their faces. This God came down to the valley of Moab and buried a human body. He did not delegate to angels. He did not leave instructions for others to execute. He himself performed the burial. What does this mean? The first implication is in the text itself. So that no one would know where, God wanted the location permanently hidden, and the only way to guarantee absolute secrecy was not to involve any human being in the process. If a single Israelite had participated in the burial, the location would have been marked, visited, turned into a shrine. The human tendency toward relic veneration was too strong. It still is. Observe how fragments of saints' bones are kept in gilded reliquaries, how tombs of religious figures attract millions of pilgrims, how objects associated with holy people become focal points of devotion that sometimes exceeds devotion to God himself. Israel had already demonstrated this tendency. While Moses was on the mountain receiving the commandments, the people convinced Aaron to make a golden calf. 40 days of absence, and they already needed something visible to worship. The liberator's body would be an incomparably greater temptation. The man who confronted Pharaoh, who parted the sea, who made water gush from rock. His bones would have become the most venerated objects in Israelite history. God prevented the problem by eliminating the possibility. But there is a second layer to this story. A layer that most people are completely unaware of. The letter of Jude, verse 9, mentions something that no other canonical text details. The Archangel Michael, when contending with the devil and arguing about the body of Moses, did not dare to pronounce against him a blasphemous judgment, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." A dispute over Moses' body between the Archangel Michael and Satan, not over the soul. The text is specific, over the physical body. Jude does not explain the full context. He only mentions the episode as if his original readers already knew the story from other sources. Scholars believe he was referencing an ancient Jewish text called the Assumption of Moses, of which only fragments survive through citations by later authors. But the canonical mention in Jude confirms that something happened around that body, something significant enough to attract the attention of the greatest spiritual forces in the universe. What did Satan want with Moses' body? Rabbinic tradition offers a consistent theory. If the body were known and accessible, it would become an object of worship. Israel would transform the liberator into an idol. They would venerate the bones, build a permanent shrine, pilgrimage to the tomb instead of seeking the living God. Sacrifices would be offered there. Prayers would be directed to the dead instead of to the Creator. Satan knows human psychology. He knows that people prefer the tangible to the invisible, the concrete to the abstract, the visible mediator to the God who cannot be seen. Moses' body would be the perfect bait to divert worship. Michael prevented it. Another interpretation suggests that Satan was trying to claim legal rights over the body because Moses had committed sin. the murder of the Egyptian at the start of his career, the failure at Meribah at the end. Satan is called the accuser of our brothers in Revelation 12. His function in the heavenly court is to point out faults, demand condemnation, argue that sinners do not deserve grace. Perhaps Satan was arguing that the body of a murderer belonged to him, that the man who struck the rock in disobedience did not deserve special treatment. That justice demanded Moses' remains be exposed, dishonored, or handed over to the jurisdiction of darkness. Michael did not enter into debate about the merits of the case. He did not try to defend Moses by listing his virtues. He did not argue that good works outweighed bad ones. He simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." He left the judgment with God, and he prevailed. Whatever the exact reason for the dispute, the episode reveals that Moses' body was no trivial matter. It mattered enough to generate confrontation between celestial beings of the highest rank. And here is the detail that connects all the layers. God did not merely hide the tomb. He assigned active supernatural protection. The body was buried personally by the Creator in a location unknown to any human being, and guarded by the Archangel Michael against the adversary's claims. 3 layers of security for a single corpse. Mount Nebo exists to this day. It is located in present-day Jordan, approximately 40 kilometers southwest of Amman, the capital. The elevation reaches about 800 meters above sea level. From the summit on clear days, the view is spectacular. The Dead Sea gleams to the south, 400 meters below sea level, the lowest point on Earth's surface. The mountains of Jerusalem appear on the western horizon. The Jordan Valley winds like a green ribbon cutting through the desert. Jericho is visible as an oasis of palm trees. Christian pilgrims have visited the site for centuries. A memorial church was built on top, first by the Byzantines in the 4th century, then rebuilt and restored multiple times. The Franciscans maintain the current sanctuary. A modern sculpture represents the bronze serpent that Moses raised in the wilderness. Archaeologists have excavated the region extensively. They mapped ruins of ancient churches, catalogued inscriptions, analyzed layers of human occupation throughout the millennia, and they never found anything related to Moses' burial. No bones, no burial artifacts, no inscriptions mentioning the exact location. Not even local traditions preserved by Bedouin communities pointing to a specific valley where the body might have been placed. The biblical text mentions opposite Beth Peor as a geographical reference. But the exact location of Beth Peor has also been lost to history. It was a place associated with the worship of Baal Peor, where Israel sinned grievously as recorded in Numbers 25. But where exactly was it? No one knows. It's as if every clue had been purposely erased, every geographical reference becoming vague enough to prevent localization. The secret remains intact 3,500 years later. Compare this situation with Jesus' tomb. Christ's body was placed in a known sepulchre. Joseph of Arimathea provided his own new tomb, hewn from rock. The women saw where he was laid. Roman guards were posted at the entrance. The Jewish leaders knew the exact location. And when the tomb was found empty on the morning of the 3rd day, there were witnesses who could confirm it was here and now it is not. The miracle of the resurrection depended on people knowing where the body had been placed so they could then verify it was no longer there. Visibility was essential to the message. With Moses, the pattern is completely opposite. The body did not disappear from a known tomb. It was placed in a tomb that was never known to anyone from the very first moment. The difference in divine approach reveals different purposes. Christ's empty tomb proclaimed resurrection, victory over death, hope for all who believe. Moses' hidden tomb prevented idolatry, protected Israel from itself, kept the focus on the living God rather than on the dead servant. But this raises another inevitable question. What happened to the body over the millennia? Three possibilities emerge from biblical texts and interpretive traditions. First possibility, natural decomposition in a secret location. Moses' body was buried and simply decomposed like any other human body over the centuries. The secret lies only in the location, not in the preservation of the body itself. The tomb exists in some valley in Moab, now containing only dust and bone fragments, and will remain unknown until the end of time or until God decides to reveal it. This is the most literal, simplest, least speculative interpretation. Second possibility, supernatural preservation. Just as Moses' body did not age normally during life, maintaining perfect vision and physical vigor until 120 years, it might also not have decomposed normally after death. Some later Jewish texts speculate that the body was preserved intact, kept in a state of suspension, awaiting some future purpose not yet revealed. This interpretation is more mystical and lacks direct textual support in the canonical scriptures. Third possibility, transformation or early resurrection. This theory connects the mystery of Moses' body with his appearance on the Mount of Transfiguration, recorded in all three synoptic Gospels. Matthew 17 describes the event. Jesus took Peter, James, and John up a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared talking with him. Moses appeared, not as a ghost, not as an abstract vision, not as a memory or symbol. He appeared concretely enough for the disciples to recognize him and witness the conversation. Luke 9, verse 31, adds a crucial detail. It says that Moses and Elijah appeared in glory. The Greek word is doxa, the same used to describe the glory of God, the glory of Christ, heavenly glory. Moses was glorified. And Luke specifies the subject of the conversation. They were discussing the exodus that Jesus was about to accomplish in Jerusalem. The man who led the first exodus, the departure from Egypt, was conversing with the one who would accomplish the definitive exodus through the cross. Elijah also appeared, but Elijah's case is different. 2 Kings 2 records that Elijah did not die. He was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind, in a chariot of fire with horses of fire. His body never saw burial. Elijah's appearance at the Transfiguration requires no special explanation about the fate of his body, because his body was translated alive. Moses, however, died. The text in Deuteronomy is explicit. He died in the land of Moab. He was buried, and he appeared in glory 1,500 years later, conversing with Jesus. This suggests that something happened between death and the Transfiguration. Either the body was resurrected at some unrecorded point, or it was transformed in a way that transcends normal human categories, or the appearance operated through spiritual mechanisms that did not depend on the physical state of the original body. The biblical text does not definitively resolve the question. It presents the facts without explaining the mechanics. Moses died. Moses was buried by God. The location remained unknown. Moses appeared in glory on the Mount of Transfiguration. The precise connection between these events remains open to interpretation, but there is yet another angle that is rarely explored: the symbolic and theological meaning of the tomb's absence. Moses represents the law in biblical structure. He is called the lawgiver. The first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, bear his name as traditional author. When the Gospels mention Moses and the prophets, they are using Moses as a metonymy for the entire Torah, the entire legal and ceremonial system that defined the Old Covenant between God and Israel. And the law, by itself, could not bring the people into the Promised Land. Observe the pattern. Moses led Israel to the border of Canaan, but it was Joshua who crossed the Jordan and led the people into the inheritance. Moses saw the land from afar. Joshua set foot in it, And the name Joshua, in Hebrew Yehoshua, is exactly the same name as Jesus in Greek, Yeshua. It means the Lord saves or salvation. The symbolism is too deliberate to be coincidence. The law brings you to a certain point. It shows the way, it defines standards, it reveals sin, but it cannot bring you into the inheritance. It is grace, represented first by Joshua and then fully by Jesus, that completes the journey and grants access to the promise. Moses did not enter the land, not only because of the specific sin at Meribah. The limitation was inscribed in the very nature of what he represented. The law points to something greater, but cannot accomplish what it points to. It condemns but does not liberate. It diagnoses but does not cure. And perhaps Moses' body remained hidden for the same symbolic principle. If there were a known tomb, there would be a pilgrimage site, a fixed center, a final destination. Israel might have turned the lawgiver's tomb into the ultimate destination of faith, instead of continuing to walk towards something greater. The absence of the tomb keeps Moses in motion, so to speak, not geographically fixed, not transformed into a static monument. The vanished body prevents the law from becoming a final destination instead of a transitional path. The Israelites mourned Moses for 30 days in the plains of Moab. Deuteronomy 34 records this full period of mourning. 30 days of intense weeping, the entire nation lamenting the loss of the leader who had guided them for 4 decades. And then life continued. Joshua assumed leadership. The people crossed the Jordan. The conquest of Canaan began. And apparently, no one went back to search for the tomb. This is extraordinary. 30 days of deep mourning, and then no recorded expedition to locate where the great leader was buried. No tradition of annual pilgrimage to the site. No record of attempts to find the mortal remains in the decades and centuries that followed. It's as if the people understood, even without formal explanation, that that tomb was not meant to be found, that the search would be futile, that God had sealed the secret definitively. Or perhaps they tried and failed so completely that not even the records of the attempt survived. Expeditions that returned empty-handed, unable to identify even the general region. Searches abandoned after months of failure. Either way, the historical silence is deafening. 3,500 years have passed since that death on Mount Nebo. Entire empires rose, dominated the known world, and crumbled to dust. Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the Islamic Caliphate, the Ottoman Empire. All passed through the region where Moses was buried. None found the tomb. Technologies that seemed absolutely impossible to the ancients have become routine. Satellites map every square meter of the Earth's surface with centimeter precision. Ground-penetrating radar reveals structures buried for millennia beneath layers of earth and rock. DNA analysis identifies mortal remains and establishes identities with scientific certainty. Carbon-14 dating determines ages within margins of a few decades. Archaeologists found submerged cities in the Dead Sea that confirm events described in Genesis. They excavated Egyptian palaces and deciphered hieroglyphics that mention Semitic peoples. They located inscriptions that reference Israelite kings by name. They unearthed seals of officials mentioned in the Bible, but Moses' tomb remains completely hidden. It's not for lack of interest. The Mount Nebo region has been extensively studied. Pilgrims have visited for 17 centuries. Monks lived there for generations. Professional archaeologists conducted systematic excavations, and nothing related to the burial was found. The contrast with other biblical discoveries is notable. The Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered by accident in the caves of Qumran. Hezekiah's tunnel in Jerusalem was identified and explored. The Pool of Siloam was excavated. The ossuary of Caiaphas appeared during construction work. Discoveries happen, sometimes in the most unexpected places. But the valley where God buried Moses remains inviolate, unidentified, sealed against all human investigation. 3,500 years, entire empires rose and fell. Technologies that seemed impossible became commonplace. Satellites map every square meter of the planet, and still, Mount Nebo keeps its secret. Perhaps that is exactly the point. Not every mystery exists to be solved. Not every question was meant to receive an answer in this age. Some things remain sealed because the answer belongs to another dimension, another time, another context that has not yet arrived. God buried Moses personally. He chose the location. He performed the burial. He assigned angelic protection. And when God decides to hide something, no human excavation can find it. No technology can reveal it. No investigative obsession can penetrate the veil. Moses' body is not lost, it is guarded. And the difference between lost and guarded is simply who is in control.